Hey there, folks, and welcome to a new series called Underscore, where this time I'll be covering what makes Mega Man X5 such a terrible game in comparison to others in the series. This is specifically on my mind because of the recently released Mega Man X collection. That game compiled all 8 Mega Man X games together in one place for the first time ever. So I made a pact to myself to beat all 8 of them in order. This started out as a really fun and challenging exercise to test my gaming skills, and I genuinely surprised myself after beating the first Mega Man X game, a feat I'd never accomplished in the 18 or more years since I started playing that game. It is truly one of the most polished, tightly designed platforming games ever created, and the series has never really reached that same height again. I moved on to X2 though, and while it had its fair share of unnecessarily frustrating platforming sections and a bit more reliance on randomness thanks to mid-bosses that would drop into random levels and had to be beaten before the rest of the Robot Masters or else they'd be gone forever and the endgame would be much harder, it was still ultimately a great game that expanded on the concepts of the first game and added some really cool new abilities and power-ups to the mix. X3 was a bit more of the same, but with more generic Robot Master designs, a few more gimmicky annoying levels, and an even more random mid-boss system, where you didn't even know what level they would show up in. They would just stop your progress in the level, whereas in X2 they were hidden for the most part. And in X3 they also had to be beaten with specific weapons in order to get the endgame reward for beating them. It was kind of a mess. X3 was overall just an overly complicated, forgettable game that was almost impossible to get 100% in without a guide, or a lot of trial and error. X4 was the one I was most excited about, because that and the original X were the only ones that ever made it past all the Robot Masters as a kid, and it's amazing how a shift to a new system brought in more focused gameplay and got rid of a lot of that annoying randomness the other games brought in. On top of being able to select between X and 0 at the start of the game, essentially doubling the replay value as each one gets their own set of power-ups from beating Robot Masters, and their own storyline, the game also just harkens back to the original X, with the most polished, well-crafted levels since that first game, and some challenging boss fights that never feel totally unpredictable or unfair with their patterns. While the game is arguably less challenging than the games that came before it, it's also a refreshing return to form after X2 and X3 got away from what mattered most in the X series, I feel. Going into the second half of the X games, though, I didn't have the same nostalgia, as I'd only briefly played X5 and X6 on the old GameCube collection of the first 6 games, and then streamed X8 a while back through a crappy PC port. But I'd heard X5 was the last good game in the series, and it was just downhill after that. Though, side note, I actually still think X8 is pretty good. Not amazing, but better than it had any right to be following up X7. I don't see how people thought X5 was a good game, though. I'll admit, jumping into it, it wasn't immediately apparent how bad the game was going to be. The opening level had X still in his 4th armor from the previous game, which was pretty cool because that plasma shot is broken, and it was nice to not start a game feeling totally underpowered. Especially when I'm doing them in order, and I kept, getting super powerful, and then starting the next one, I'm like, oh yeah, I can't do any of that stuff. But anyway, as soon as Aaliyah kept stopping me every few feet to explain something about the level, I could tell this game was different from the streamlined experience of X4. Honestly, the generic opening cinematic should have clued me into the lack of production value in this game compared to its predecessor, but I gave them the benefit of the doubt because everyone had complained about the voice acting in X4 anyway. Maybe they were just listening to fans. By the time I got introduced to the 8 Robot Masters, and the countdown clock, and the Reploids that would need rescuing in each stage, and all the other overcomplicated mechanics introduced in the game though, I knew this was not what I wanted from a Mega Man X game. To start, your mission is to get the 4 parts needed to reconstruct some beam weapon that can destroy the enemy space station, or something. There was so much dialogue in the game, I ended up just speeding past most of it because it was really poorly translated. But anyway, you have access to all 8 Robot Masters from the start, but your mission only involves half of them. And with a countdown clock to your impending doom, there's not really any incentive to stray off the set path to victory. What this means is that while other games are more focused on jumping into a level, getting to the Robot Master and seeing if you can take them on, requiring a lot of trial and error, especially for the first one you choose as that sets the path of weaknesses for the others, This game punishes you for leaving a level without beating it because an hour takes off the countdown whether you go into a level and beat it or not. So gone are the days of jumping into levels, grabbing any E-tanks, hard upgrades, and body parts you can reach before taking on all the bosses. Now it's just wisely picking the exact level you think you can beat, blindly I might add unless you use a guide like I did to cut down on the risk, and then play that level over and over again until you beat it. This frustration is mediated slightly by the prolific checkpoints, as even after a game over you can continue from the same last checkpoint, but this also means that if you miss some kind of power-up in the level, the only way to go back is to leave the level and go back in. Which, yep, ticks down the clock again. And I haven't even gotten into how bad these levels are yet, and how little motivation you probably have to struggle to beat them anyway. In past games, if a level would frustrate me, I'd just leave it, move on to another one for a while, and then come back to the other one. That would help them be more palatable because by the time I came back, I'd have some kind of new trick. Either more energy, more weapons, etc. But this one pits you with uninspired and outright annoying levels and punishes you for wanting to leave them. That's a 1-2 punch of bad game design. Let's take on Tidal Whale, for example. And yes, before you comment, I'm using the official translated names of these bosses used in the X Collection, not the ones some love-struck translator decided to use instead back in the day. Deal with it. Anyway, Tidal Whale's stage just has you in a slow-as-molasses auto-scroll level, where a submarine chases you and shoots various things at you. You can attack the sub, but it respawns its weapon ports by the end, so it doesn't matter much. There's not many other enemies in this stage, but there's also very little room to move around. So it just boils down to hugging walls and avoiding shots while waiting for the screen to scroll far enough to go anywhere. The screen stops scrolling, you fight the sub for real, and then move on to another section where the sub attacks you from a different angle. Repeat the process, beat it again, then yay, the water drains and you have a fairly normal platforming section in a sunken ship. This small section is pretty neat on its own, but sure enough, it lasts all of 5 seconds and then you're chased up the rest of the level by the sub. And as soon as you get to the boss door, you have to fight the sub again. I repeat, the last thing you do in this level before the boss is to fight a mini-boss. So after it's sapped all of your energy, you go through the boss checkpoint doors and fight Tidal Whale. Almost every boss in this game is a joke, especially as X, so they're not really worth touching on. But this level is just so poorly designed, it could single-handedly prove my point that X5 is a terrible game. Let's move on though, because there's more examples. Another of these first 4 levels is Volt Kraken, which, again, the names of the bosses in this game are pretty rad for the most part, and the only good thing about his stage is the name. It starts with the opposite of Tidal Whale's stage, a speeder bike section that moves so fast that you can fall in a pit and die before the ready has even left the screen. I'm not exaggerating. From there, it becomes just a series of quick button presses you almost have to memorize because they come too quickly for the average person to just react naturally on the first or second try. This is made even more difficult by the fact that the body part in this level is only available if you grab all of the Volt Orbs in this first section of the level. A feat so frustratingly and unnecessarily difficult that I probably spent more time on just that than I did on the rest of the game. Between how fast you have to react, the exact timing needed to reach a few of the orbs, and the poor collision detection leading to missing an orb I very clearly landed on, this is an exercise in frustration that ultimately isn't even really worth it because the body part upgrades in this game are garbage anyway. We'll take a quick detour here to explain why. There are 2 armor sets in this game, and you only get the armor when you've collected all 4 parts. X is selectable in the character select menu before entering a level, but he'll never get stronger. You just select the armor to take in instead of underpowered X once you unlock the whole set, which means you'll probably never actually use X, which is fine because he sucks anyway. In the endgame though, you can get the ultimate armor for X, or the Black Zero suit for Zero, which for the first time actually improves his defense and attack power, one of the few good things about this game. And since the other 2 armor sets X can earn are really only good for specific platforming sections in the levels to get a few certain hard upgrades, they're hardly even worth getting, largely due to the fact that the countdown timer kinda prevents you from being able to even do it until after you've beaten all 8 Robot Masters and stopped the timer. And soon after that, you get the ultimate armor anyway, which is better than both of them. So what's really the point? Back to Voltkraken. The rest of the stage is fine, at least you're not on a speeder bike, but it introduces a stupid gimmick of activating color-coded doors by pushing in the switches that control them. They're on timers though, like everything else in this friggin' game, and enemy respawns make this whole section more annoying than it needs to be. This part isn't so much bad as just counterintuitive and not fun. There are plenty of Reploids to rescue that fill your energy and give extra lives, so it never feels hard. Just a mild inconvenience on the way to the boss, but it's still not good level design. Once again, the boss is nothing special. He's a squid that can use electricity. That's original. We'll burn through these next few pretty quickly because they're pretty straightforward and uninspired, but not bad. First, there's the bug formerly known as Izzy Glow, Shining Firefly, a boss with a name as generic as his stage. And the only thing to note about this one is how much Aelia talks. What little challenge this level might have held is ruined by Aelia chiming in every few feet with, "Be careful, this section has spikes. Be careful, there's things here that will crush you. Watch out, those machines shoot at you." Like, come on, woman, this is the 5th game in this series. I think I know how the platforming sections work. A lot of people say that X6 is worse than this game, and in some ways I agree. But man, at least in that one you have to choose to listen to her constant insight about the levels. She makes Navi look like a Buddhist monk. Plus, while we're on the topic, every time you beat a Robot Master, she gives the same speech about how the new powers work that you earned from them. Who still needs to know that after 8 Robot Masters? I wish you would have stayed dead after X4. There, I said it. Aelia sucks. Moving on. Crescent Grizzly isn't even worth mentioning. Every game seems to have that obligatory stage where you just dash across military trucks and stuff. It's throwaway, but it's fine. After the first set of 4 Robot Masters, or earlier if you get lucky on the RNG, you have all 4 parts needed to blast the space station out of the sky. Well, out of space, I guess. So another overlong dialogue-heavy cutscene happens where, surprise, surprise, it fails and you have to get 4 more parts for another MacGuffin. I honestly don't even remember what it was at this point. I started drowning out the story stuff because I was already over this game after the speeder section and Voltkraken stage broke me. This leads to the second set of 4 Robot Masters, and while none of these are as bad as the first 4, they're still terrible in their own right. Dark Necrobat is definitely the worst of this bunch, as it's another level where you spend most of it just waiting for the stage to scroll as you stand on a slow-moving platform and the constellations come to life and drop instant death spikes on you when you have barely anywhere else to go. It also causes slowdown whenever the ridiculous amount of enemies spawn, but I'm not sure if that was by design or just the game engine struggling to handle its own stupid level design. The second half of this level isn't any better and plays out like a worse version of one of X4's worst levels, Cyber Peacock. This one also has a bland gravity switching mechanic that doesn't really add anything to the level, but for the most part it's just walking forward while trippy background animates behind you. It's harmless, cool, whatever. This level also has the worst to reach body upgrade capsule. You have to aim a missile through a maze with poor collision detection in order to hit a button that opens your way to the capsule. And guess what? That missile is also Necrobat's weakness. So I hope you don't run out while trying to get this stupid part that doesn't matter anyway. If you do run out though, too bad. This room is right before the boss room, so there's no chance to refill without a weapon tank. Necrobat is pretty boring though, aside from a ridiculous vampire move that sucks like half your energy bar and fills his, so you don't really need his weakness. Just keep your distance and he's a pushover. Next is Spiral Pegasus, which is sadly probably the best level in the game. It starts with destroying countdown bombs before they explode, because yeah, let's add more timers to this game. But it's ultimately a harmless level with some light platforming, then an elevator leading to another section with bombs to destroy, another elevator, repeat until the boss room. Pegasus himself just feels like a budget Storm Eagle, complete with swoop attacks on top of an air carrier, and the weapon he's weak to is extremely lame. It's basically Flashman's power from Megaman 2, where it freezes the screen, but this is pretty much the only time you'll use it. I tried it on a few other enemies and they're immune. It makes him specifically a pushover though, even if it doesn't last long enough to fully take him out. Next up is Burn Dino-Rex, which is a name and design almost as generic as Shining Firefly, and his stage is about tied for the worst of this back half. It starts with a bunch more warnings from Alia about avoiding the lava flow, which, side note, if the developers felt the need to put in this much explanation of the level mechanics, it sounds like the levels themselves weren't intuitive enough to explain themselves. Anyway, then you drop down and have to hide behind specific platforms so you don't get insta-killed by lava, and then quickly dash to the next hiding spot and wait again. That's basically it. It's not hard, or clever, it just sucks. The second half isn't any better, despite the perceived element of choice adding some non-linearity to the level. You can either hop into the right armor, the only time you use it in the whole game if I remember correctly, or take the high ground and just deal with another basically on-rails section where a flame dragon spits at you as you jump from platform to platform to the end. The right armor section is infinitely more fun, but it's also essentially broken. At least it was for me. The armor allows you to go under lava, which doesn't even make sense because if you try to exit the armor under the lava, you die instantly. But there's no protective headgear or anything, so how does it even keep you alive? This game is so dumb. Anyway, while in the lava, you're basically just doing a standard platforming level as enemies charge at you and you knock them out like Thanos versus the Avengers because none of them stand a chance. At the end of this section, there's a platform above the lava with a body part capsule on it. Seemingly, this is where you jump out of the armor and land on this platform, as the armor itself can't make the jump to get out of the lava. But every time I tried to exit the armor above the lava flow, it wouldn't work. I tested the button combos required to leave the armor outside of the lava and it worked every time. But in that one spot, which is the only way to get out of this section of the level, it wouldn't let me get out. I accidentally jumped out in the lava a few times and died instantly, so that was cool, but the level itself appeared to be broken, so the only way I could actually progress further was the boring platform way without the cool armor. Even when this game tries to be clever, it fails. That part was almost actually cool. Come on, game. Anyway, Bernie McBurnersar, an infinitely better name than Burn Dino Rex or Matrex, is the most frustrating robot master in the game. He is massive compared to the size of his battlefield, and with Zero at least, his weakness is a ground dash/slash attack, which leaves Zero vulnerable during the attack animation, so it ends up being more harmful than helpful most of the time, as Dino's invincibility frames when hit are hard to predict, and he starts attacking again while he's still blinking, so you can't even stun lock him very well like a lot of the other bosses. Spike Rose Red is another pretty generic level and boss not even worth mentioning, but I will say that it made too much use of the awful new ability to slide along certain grab poles. That wasn't a good thing to add to the game in the first place, and when they bombard the pole with enemies that knock you off on hit, it's just the opposite of fun. That should be the tagline for this game. Megaman X5, the opposite of fun. After slogging through that second set of Robot Masters, more boring story text happens, and it turns out that Zero has to be sent to the space station to stop it from the inside. Which, I mean, cool, that's interesting, but you can continue playing as him as you go back through the levels, sans countdown timer, picking up any stuff you missed in the levels. And side note, these levels aren't any more fun going back through them the second time. Anyway, on to the final levels. We're almost done with this stupid game. I promise, stick with me. The first stage, right out of the gate, drops you into a gauntlet of stupidity, as you get bombarded by these new Zero viruses that chase and try to infect you with the Sigma virus, something that can actually change the outcome of the game if you're not careful. After that, you drop down into what is essentially another section of quick reaction time memorization. Beams that are impossible to destroy or avoid shoot across the screen and insta-kill you. And this whole section is seemingly impossible to trick. You just have to be extremely fast and precise to avoid death, which starts you back at the beginning of the stage, getting chased by Zero viruses again. After I finally got a perfect run through this awful, awful area, however, my friend Marvelous Iggy informed me that you can use Necrobat's time-freezing power to cheese through this whole section. Which admittedly made me very mad and regret my life choices, but also just baffled me, because every second of this game has been filled with unnecessary explanation from Alia, but she didn't think to maybe hint at that? I'd only used that power once, successfully, against the Robot Master weak to it, so since then I'd honestly forgotten I even had it. I don't inherently chalk this up to how bad this game is. That one's kind of on me. But it's still not good design to make this section next to impossible unless you use the one power that has almost never worked anywhere else in the game. Anyway, past that awful section is a fight with the Black Devil, a variant to the Yellow Devil not seen since the original Mega Man games. That's pretty neat. Kind of a Mega Man staple mid-boss showing up for the first time in this series. It actually made me a little happy. You get a point for this one, X5. But I'm watching you. Oh, wait, never mind. They ruined him. He still sends globs across the screen to perform, just like the good old Yellow Devil, but it creates this obnoxious screen-filling square shape and then splooges down to the regular Black Devil shape, so it's so much harder to avoid than any devil before it. And then the eye appears in some random location on his body for all of 10 seconds, which is the only time it can be hit, and sometimes poor collision detection means taking damage just to even reach the eye. The Yellow Devil was never easy, but it was at least a more predictable pattern. To make matters even worse, as Zero at least, you can totally cheese the entire fight without any real difficulty. It's possible to repeatedly wall jump in the corner as the Black Devil square forms, and again, due to poor collision detection, never take damage from being in the corner, even though it looks like you're getting hit. It turns the battle from an exercise in frustration to a pathetic time waste. Where's the middle ground, X5? The second stage is pretty boring and generic, but at least it doesn't have any absurd gimmicks to it. Pretty sad that that's a high point at this point, but hey, we'll take what we can get. The seizure-inducing animated background still made it hard to play though, because it just offended my eyes to look at it too much. Luckily, it's pretty quick and ends in an equally easy boss that's an odd throwback choice. You know, that old chestnut, that old staple Mega Man enemy. Hieroglyphic wall guy. Nothing to say about it really. Hug the walls as they close in and spam attacks. On to the third stage. And oh god, the background is even worse. I get that they're going for like a cyber world that's been infected by a virus, but they did not nail it even a little bit. This looks like if someone digitized the bastard love child of Gary Busey and Carrot Top and then lived inside that digital monstrosity. Anyway, this section is more of those stupid grab poles over pits and just spikes everywhere. I've learned that whenever a Mega Man game runs out of ideas, it just fills a normal platforming section full of spikes and pits and says, "Have fun, sucker. We ran out of good designs 2 games ago. Why are you still playing this?" If you can stand to spend more time in this hideous level than you have to, there are a few secrets in the pits though, including the upgrade capsule for the Ultimate Armor or Black Zero armor, depending on who you're playing as. This is crucial for the end of the game. By which I mean it makes the rest of the game a joke, since from this point on it's basically just battles. First, there's the Zero vs. X fight, which is probably the best one in the whole game, but from a story standpoint it kind of squanders the potential of it all. It would somewhat make sense if Zero had been infected by the virus at this point, but because I avoided that, it feels like they just choose to fight instead of talk it out, which is a trope I'm kind of tired of. You could be infected! I have to stop you! Wait, no, I think you're infected, or else you'd never threaten to hurt me, so I have to stop you! So much testosterone. Just kiss already, boys. After the fight is another terrible static cutscene that finally introduces Sigma. No surprise there. And then the final gauntlet of Robot Masters and Sigma fights. It's a shame though. This game could have had a fairly engaging story if it didn't tell it in such a boring way. Say what you will about the voice acting in X4, but at least that game had some awesome anime-inspired cinematics to tell the story. If they'd used that same approach to this game, instead of making it so dialogue-heavy with barely any animation to the visuals, it might have redeemed itself a bit on story alone. Anyway, at least this final battle stage is a little less offensive on the eyes. It basically just steals the aesthetic of Cyber Peacock and Dark Necrobat to show that you're basically inside the computer.
In the computer. It's so simple.
We're on to the final Sigma fight. Surprisingly though, Sigma in this game almost feels like an afterthought, with only 2 phases that both have patterns that are pretty easy to predict and avoid. In fact, despite never seeing it before, I beat the second Sigma form on my first try. That's how easy he was. After that easy fight, the game ends unceremoniously with another mostly static cutscene, as Zero is, I guess, killed by Sigma as he sacrifices himself to protect X and do one final hit. I don't know exactly because the cutscene isn't told very well, and he's alive again in X6, so it's not totally clear. I do know there are other endings too, depending on whether you beat the game as X or if you let Zero go Maverick from the virus infection, but I honestly couldn't be bothered to beat it again because it's a no-good, very bad game, So this is my only point of reference. I'm sure the other endings are equally terrible and not canon anymore anyway, since X6 kind of undid everything from this game. So, yeah, that's X5. I think it disappointed me so much for two reasons. One is that a lot of people claimed it's the last good one, as X6 and on were developed by a different team and feel canonically disconnected after they retconned X5's ending. And the other is that after X2 and X3 strayed away from what made the original so great, X4 felt like mostly returned to form. Sure, you can still see the seams of its level design not being as polished, and the robot masters aren't as unique as some of the earlier ones, but it injected new life into the series and simplified a lot of the mechanics that got out of hand by X3. Then, for X5 to come along and just feel so drastically different again, and for the worse no less, was just a major disappointment, made all the more real by the quick succession in which I played these games. I went from X1 to X5 in about 2 weeks, so the gameplay changes and drastic quality differences in regards to level designs was much more noticeable than if I'd played each game at launch and had the nostalgia for certain aspects, I think. That's why I wanted to put this video together, to give an overview of the elements of this game and why most of them just don't work, and feel completely antithetical to what makes the X series what it is. The countdown timer is the biggest departure, as it strips the game of that trial and error idea. Once you go into a level, you almost have to beat it or else you'll waste time. And since a lot of the heart upgrades, body parts, and even energy tanks require some kind of power up to access, you spend most of the game feeling underpowered, whereas in past games, you would make a mental note to come back to a secret after you had the power to get it, so it felt like you got more progressively strong as you went through the game. Needing to get all 4 parts of an armor set before you can use it is another one of these antithetical ideas. Let's compare it to the original X game. What if they made it so you can't use the dash until you've gotten every other part of the armor? That would be a nightmare. It's an annoying tease to seemingly unlock a new power just to have to wait to even see what it does. But in X, you need the dash to get pretty much every other body part, and that was something great about that game that's missing from X5. There are parts for one armor set that you can't get without the other armor set, but it's not the same. It's lacking that element of feeling stronger as you go, rather than just an entire change in your ability set when you equip a new armor. I've spent long enough harping on this game, but it just surprises me how everyone says X6 is worse than this one when, while they both have terrible level designs and X6 has some equally awful gimmicks, it still streamlines a lot of the elements that ruin X5, such as getting rid of the time limit, making all the annoying alien hints optional, and giving you free reign to do Robot Masters in any order you want. I could still fill a whole video full of what sucks in X6, trust me. But X5 is just extra egregious in this disappointment because it fails at even implementing the elements the X series is known for. It doesn't feel like just a poorly designed Megaman X game, it feels like a game from a totally different series that just happens to control like an X game. It's obviously still better than X7, that one is just absolute hot garbage that should not have ever been made, but X5 is easily the worst of the 2D X games. And that's all I have to say about that. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. I hope that I've thoroughly underscored why Mega Man X5 is a terrible game. I've been your host, Justin, and until next time, have fun. Hopefully with a better game than Mega Man X5.